Silence surrounded her. The only sound came from the soft panting tumbling from her lips. She hovered just above the blonde, muscular stranger, the borrowed knife buried just behind his head into the hardened earth. She sat still a moment longer, assured her movements would draw him from his slumber. And yet he didn't budge. She needed a few deep breaths to still her rapidly beating heart. Linzi then carefully slipped off of his hip and leaned over for the knife, staring at the beautifully ornate handle. She pulled and pushed against it, her teeth locked tightly together as she worked the weapon free from its hold. She hadn't the courage to take the man's life. Or perhaps it was more she wasn't coward enough to do it while he lay dead to the waking world. From the depths she had managed to stick the knife into the earth. She at least knew she had the strength to do it. She straddled the injured stranger, trying to ignore the wonderful sensation of his warmth between her legs. It beckoned to be tempted further. Nor the now, she scolded herself. This was not the time. Her body lurched backwards as the knife released, the power of her tugging almost giving way to momentum that could roll her down the small hill behind her. She heaved a sigh, bending down to cut a small strip from her gown and wrapping the weapon in the material. She would keep it until he demanded it back, or forgot he ever had it. If he lived, surely it was worth something in the nearby town. Treasures such as this one were far too difficult to come by. Linzi stood, turning to ensure her solitude once more before looking back towards the Saxon. He was breathtaking, her stomach tightening at the memory of the sensation of his strong hands gripping her, his hips bucking as if sex might grant him healing. One bloody marking on your shoulder and all of a sudden you behave like a tart, she mumbled, and stood there a moment longer before realizing she needed to do something with his body. She couldn't leave him in the field. If she wasn't going to take his life and bury him in the woods, then she had no choice but to help him. Maybe back to good health and then shoving him on his way was the only other option. Unsure of her sense of reason, Linzi decided to stop overthinking and began moving towards resolution. Her eyes drifted over to him once more. The healer in her already working through a concoction she would need to pull from the herb garden just behind the house to offer balm to the wounds on his chest, stomach and back. It would take more than a quick remedy to fix him, and the chances of his survival might be slim. However, she refused to be the barbarian these beasts trying to take her country were. She grabbed the kitchen knife lying still on the ground by the Saxon, and then hurried back toward the house, the trickle of liquid running down her open palm giving her pause. She lifted her hand, grimacing at the pain caused by reopening the rope burn, which had yet to close from the day before. Blood dripped down her wrist and ran down a crimson line toward her white gown. No, damn! She slung her hand, blood decorating the ground before her. The thought of tearing off a bit more of her night dressing crossed her mind, but she pushed it quickly aside. It was already too small and tight. Another inch off the bottom and she would find herself not only starting to act, but also looking like a tart from the nearby town. She shook her head and jogged towards the house, slipping into the coolness it offered. She had no time to catch her breath. She tossed the kitchen knife on the table before she checked on her father, ensuring he was still all right. Nothing but serenity greeted her, the fresh smell of honeysuckle pouring in from the door behind her, and the gentle snoring of her father. She would check him again before she left the house. It seemed his fever might have dropped, his body no longer pushing heat, like the sun soon would be on the fields behind the house. It reminded her of the pressing matter outside. She worked quickly to wrap her hand. She would need to get the large man out of the yard and bring him into the house. She had no choice. She couldn't simply deposit him in the woods and watch over him there. What if a large animal attacked him during the night? He was much too beautiful to be given over for food. The Saxon had to be a head taller than her, and at least 100 pounds heavier. She was strong from her years of working on the farm with her father and brother, but to think about lifting him onto a horse, or dragging him back to the house from his current location was ignorant. She couldn't do it. Impossible to do it alone.